This is definitely the most controversial disaster film so far. Some people regard it as a classic that is hard to reproduce, and some people look down on it. The most controversial point is that the setting of the film is simple and crude. As long as there is a slight wind blowing, anyone will fight for their lives. This is simply an incomprehensible existence. In the Central Park at the beginning of the summer, tourists are having a good time. A gentle breeze passed by, and the original noise stopped. The air seems to be solidified. People stand still and don't move. The girl on the street noticed something was wrong. She just wanted to remind her companion, but she found the other person's eyes were empty. Then she took off her hairpin and stabbed her neck. The rest of the people also began to fall. The blood soon dyed the grass in the park. On the construction site not far from here, Bao Gautu thought that the workers were dead by accident. Until the next moment, the workers seemed to have made a deal. A sudden downpour from the skyscraper. The death storm came quietly, almost killed everyone. At this time, the natural science teacher, Nick, was still concentrating on teaching until the principal called him to the office. This is when he learned about the tragedy in the Central Park. Everyone thought this was a poisonous gas attack from terrorists. For safety reasons, the principal decided to suspend the class. All the students in the school were evacuated. Foss and Nick have been good friends for many years. He felt that this crisis was not a small class, so he invited the other person to escape to his hometown. Nick had some hesitation. After returning home, he learned more details from the TV news. Officials suspected that this was a new type of virus that could block the transmission of neurons, but he knew nothing about the reaction mechanism of the virus and how it appeared. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Nick finally agreed to his colleague's invitation, decided to follow the other person to the countryside to avoid the wind. He rushed to the station with his wife. Only after seeing Foss and his daughter, after inquiring, he learned that Foss's wife could not make it because of the traffic jam. The train was about to start. He could only make his wife change to the next class. Not long after the train started, another park was severely damaged. As the wind blew, everyone stopped. A police officer pointed his gun at himself and fired. Then the others lined up like a row of seats. Pick up the gun once and kill yourself. Passengers in the carriage soon learned of this accident. The atmosphere of uneasiness was getting more and more turbulent. Foss wanted to contact his wife. However, the communication signal was broken. He was upset and had no time to care about the endless discussion of the passengers. But at this time, the train suddenly stopped. Everyone got off the train in a blind face. They learned from the trainman that the signal in front of them was cut off for no reason. The train could not continue to move forward. Fortunately, there was a small town here. Nick brought his family to the restaurant for dinner. Through the phone of the guest at the table, he saw a more horrific picture. The breeder bit himself like an owl. Everyone was in a daze. They have never experienced such a strange disaster. At this time, the officials sent an emergency notice. They denied the speculation of the previous terrorist attack, because this disaster has spread all over the country, and the small town where Nick stayed is the center of the disaster. The fear of the unknown is spreading in the air. People have not recovered from the shock. The restaurant has no sign of power outage. The people can no longer help. They ran out of the restaurant in a frenzy. In this end-of-the-day escape, most people couldn't take care of themselves. Nick begged everywhere, but he still couldn't find a car to go out of town, until a couple of good-natured couples were willing to take them in. The couple sighed. However, the good friend Fuse had his own plan. The wife has been out of touch for 2 hours. No matter what, he has to find the other party. But Fuse didn't want his daughter to take the risk, so he entrusted his daughter to the couple. They smiled and agreed to meet at the meeting place. However, Nick knew that they would never see each other again after this farewell. As expected, not long after Fuse's car left, they walked into a street full of corpses. Countless dead hang on the trees by the road. The passengers in the car were screaming. They tried to seal all the gaps, but missed the scratches on the top of the roof. Deep despair flowed out of Fuse's eyes. At the next moment, the car stopped without a sign. With a loud crash, several passengers rushed out. Only Fuse walked down the car, picking up a piece of glass on the ground. On the other side, Nick and others couldn't get anywhere. They saw a lot of dead bodies lying at the intersection. Obviously, there was also a virus attack. The driver could only turn to the other exit, but he met a military car on the crossroad. The soldiers on it hurriedly told everyone that the front base had all committed suicide. Don't go in this direction. As a result, his voice was not heard. Several cars drove in the other direction. They also experienced a virus attack. At this time, Nick finally realized that no matter which direction he went, it seemed to be a dead end. He tried to call Fuse, but no one answered the phone. Nick had a bad feeling. At this time, A mother was talking to the family of Princeton. That's where Fuse was looking for his wife. Nick hurriedly rushed forward. As a result, the sound of glass shattering was heard from the phone. Obviously, the city was also in danger. Nick sat by the side of the road for a long time. He wanted to go find his wife's friend. It is estimated that the other party was also very angry. The depression in his heart was out of control. The only thing he could do was to take good care of Fuse's daughter. After calming down, Nick began to discuss the next countermeasures with everyone. Everyone realized that every time an accident happened, it seemed that there was a slight wind blowing, and the accident site was in the densely populated area. Nick speculated that the virus may be the toxin released by the plant. The starting condition is that the gathered crowd reaches a certain number. At that time, the soldier asked the survivors to divide into 2 groups and try to escape to a remote place. However, when everyone was passing a plane, a slight wind blew past the small team in front of them. Everyone stopped in a hurry. The soldier shouted loudly, "My firearm is my friend." Then he pulled out a gun on his waist. The sound of the gun was like a heavy hammer knocking on everyone's heart. The small team in front of him collapsed in an instant. Nick couldn't believe his words. Could a dozen people be able to trigger the plant virus together? The rest of the small team panicked for a moment. The man forced himself to calm down. He combined the theory of natural science and speculated that the smell of human secretion stimulated the plant. As long as they ran to the top, they would be able to avoid the attack of the virus. At this time, there was a slight wind blowing not far away. He told everyone to scatter and run away. The strange wind seemed to grow eyes and quickly passed behind the survivors. At this time, there was no point in running away. Nick and his wife closed their eyes and waited for the trial of fate. When everything was back to normal, they were surprised to find that they had not been hit. It seems that Nick's speculation is correct. The virus does have something to do with human secretion and wind direction. Because the previous team ran away, at this time, there were 2 more young strangers besides Nick's wife and Nick's daughter. Nick hurried to the abandoned car. He wanted to know the latest situation from the radio, but he accidentally saw a farmhouse not far away. Everyone ran over without hesitation. Nick found a map on the bookshelf. He was going to escape to a place where there was no plant and few people. He accidentally saw a green paper in the living room for decoration. Nick thought of a magazine he had read before. Some time ago, a scientist found ancient bacteria in the sea. A fisherman accidentally stuck it on, and soon died inexplicably. What's more strange is that even bees have disappeared recently. Nick is not sure if these are related to the plant virus, but he can be sure of one thing. There are plants all over this house. It may be bad to stay here for a long time. After lunch, everyone packed up and continued on their way. But just when they climbed the half-mountain slope, they saw 2 pairs of survivors walking towards the farmhouse. Just when they were about to meet, they suddenly got up and stood still. Obviously, the number of people exceeded the limit and triggered the plant virus. The survivors began to play all kinds of tricks. Nick and others couldn't bear to look at it anymore and quickly fled in the opposite direction. Without realizing it, they walked for a long time and almost exhausted. They saw a house from a distance. Nick took the initiative to ask the owner of the house if he could take them in. However, the residents in the house were already worried about being infected. Nick and others hurriedly left. The 2 young people who were on the same way felt uneasy and tried hard to knock on the window. As a result, at the next moment, a long gun shot out of the gap in the door. The boy at the door fell to the ground. When everyone was still in a daze, the gunshot came out of the window. The little black thing by the window also turned into a corpse. The owner's curse was heard again in the house. Nick could not bear the pain and hurriedly fled with his wife and daughter. The sky gradually darkened. They met another family again. Nick decided to explore first. This time he was lucky. The owner's wife was very good at speaking. She was the only one at home. She prepared a hearty dinner for everyone. Although the couple were grateful, they always felt that the old man was a little strange. Nick and his wife were discussing the next trip, but they didn't want to look back. The old man was standing at the door. Nick was almost speechless. He thought he should leave here as soon as possible. The next day, he found that his wife and daughter had disappeared. He was confused and went downstairs to look for them, but he saw that the old man's door was empty. Nick pushed the door in curiously. He saw a strange doll lying on the bed. The next second, his wife appeared behind him. Anger accused Nick of being a thief. Nick realized that this old man should have been alone for too long. He had a mental problem. He hurried out to continue to explain, but he saw that the old man was standing still. The leaves on the top of his head were moving crazily. Nick's eyes were wide open. He quickly returned to the cabin. As soon as he closed the door, he heard a knock outside. The old woman was obviously infected with the plant virus. He felt the wind blowing into the living room. Nick went to the kitchen. He used a towel to block the gaps. At this time, he heard his wife's voice. He pushed the wooden door of the next room. The sound was clearer. His wife was playing in the mess in the yard with her daughter. There was a hollow pipe on both sides, so he could hear the voice of both sides. Nick was not happy at all, because he found that the plant seemed to have evolved. Even if it was the breath of a single person, the other party could capture it sharply. The death of the old woman is the proof. Nick can't imagine how humans can get through this disaster. Anyway, most of them are dead. At this time, he just wanted to stay with his wife. After that, Nick took the initiative to leave the house. Unexpectedly, his wife also pushed the door towards him. The two of them quickly met in the middle of the space. The wind was blowing around. The couple held hands and waited for the death to come. However, more than 10 minutes passed. They were still safe. When Nick left the house, the strange disaster ended automatically. After 3 months, everything was back to normal. Fuse's daughter stayed at Nick's house. Experts speculated that this disaster was a warning to human destruction. It was like a tidal wave in the ocean. It came suddenly and went quickly. The camera turned to the central park where the sound was restored. The people were enjoying their leisure time. There were almost no signs. Everyone was frozen in place. The terrible plant virus came again. I don't know if they will disappear this time. The above is all the content of the disaster. This movie is definitely a representative work of childhood shadows. Although there are no shocking shots, the horror atmosphere is quite good. I believe many people are impressed by this movie. Okay, that's it for today. If you like it, please continue to pay attention. See you next time.